Parables Intertwined, a storybook. Story 1, Strength Through Endurance, dedicated to Mary Garth Flood, my first cousin. When one is a multi-rape victim survivor, how in heaven's name did I survive, endure, and find strength? When one is a woman in this world, facing all kinds of assaults and discrimination, unending patriarchy, and heaven forbid, women who support it, how in heaven's name does one find the strength to go on? When the glass ceiling is really made of concrete, how does a woman, an everyday woman with individual gifts, a human being with exceptional talent, keep finding the strength to go on and claim her rightful place? Is survival a place? Is survival a badge of honor? Is survival a reward for living through the unspeakable, the horrific, the unacknowledged, the unpardonable, the unending and never-ending attacks on one's rightful place in this world, and continuing to hold on to oneself and face the horror? I really don't know, but I truly care. And I'm going to share with you how I keep to be filled with the strength that turned into endurance. And frankly, I am far more than just plain strong. I am empowered. I am gifted. I am way more powerful than I am aware. I am strong beyond anything I could have imagined I would become. And I am not afraid and will not live in fear. I believe in both free will and predestination. Interesting, huh? For me, nothing else explains what my life turned out to be or was meant to be. But I do know that every effing thing that happened to me in my life, glorious and horrific, was something I could use. And use I did. There is not one empty crumb left to be wasted. Strength, strength, what art thou? You were born into my life from sheer fear. Fear from as long as I can remember. Fear as an invisible child. Numbing fear. Thinking I could stop the chaos surrounding me if I were just as good as I could possibly be. If I were just as helpful as I could be. If I were just as quiet as I could be and hide out in the quiet. Just how could I be escorting the Queen of Libya in 1966 and 1967 and be evacuated in the Arab-Israeli Six-Day War on June 8, 1967, and wind up 5 years later a multi-rape victim survivor? And the fear continued and reached an all-time high in the 1970s with the loss of everything except my soul. Nobody was going to get my soul, no matter how cruel, how inhumane, how vicious, how criminal. I was going to stand up, even if my head were split open and bleeding. Something kept me going, something I could not name, except something I could not understand, except that it was coming out on paper. The writing. The writing. I could not even see that it was my writing. How could that possibly be? I just kept calling it the writing. But it would not stop. It flowed forth on toilet paper, napkins, pieces of any paper that were around, and beyond any belief I could have had at the time, it was read and appreciated. I was asked if I were black, if I were a sociologist, if I were a psychologist by the University of Colorado oral interpretation graduate class in a piece called Thoughts Intertwined with Hair, written off watching the production here. And the writing just kept coming and does to this day, even though it took me a long time to claim it. When one is invisible or so damaged from violence, the quiet of the pen, with no one to stop its force, leaps into existence with a power I could understand and intellectually, but not at all emotionally. To this day, it is amazing for me to find something I wrote 20 or 30 years ago and shake my head in wonder at its clarity and relevance and understand it emotionally. Ogden Nash, one of my favorite writers, wrote, "Candy is dandy, but liquor is quicker," to which I added, "But freedom is thicker than blood, and the power of the pen will win in the end with love." Fear, I have concluded, is a very powerful force and certainly affects one's creativity. But it stimulated something else in me also, being aware of how frightened others were, especially children. I do not know why or how that happened. Predestination, of course, but I was always reading, newspapers being one of my daily reads. Even my father called me the little professor. And yet the writing would not stop. And in 1974, the first speech that I wrote for the first black mayor of Boulder, Colorado, became his keynote speech for the Ohio NAACP, a speech I entitled New Philadelphia, Ohio. And 2 years later, in 1976, a speech on affirmative action for Mary E. Baca, a Denver community leader, who was the keynote speaker at the Blue Shield National Conference in San Francisco. And there was such music in my soul because of my father. He was an incredible piano player, playing by ear, which haunted me so until I understood that that was a gift. I am a musician, a piano player, and a singer, another source of great joy and probably a lifesaver in the midst of terror and chaos. And then it became a gift to give. And then I was asked to play and perform. For heaven's sakes, even performed Bertha, a 65-year-old protester, loved that, in Pippin in 2007. And all kinds of piano playing and organ playing and singing for years and years with the Serendipity, especially with the Serendipity Chorale for 35 years out of Norwalk, Connecticut, an integrated group that performed with Andy Williams in 1986 and several times with Pete Seeger. Who could make these stories up? And being painted by Bob Ragland, an extraordinary artist who painted Roses and Rachel in June of 1976, and a screenshot of me in the Great Rocky Mountain Jazz Party, also in 1976. A story that began right in North Adams because Mattie Trudeau married Dick Gibson, and they were the couple who threw that party for 30 years, of which I attended 10. Stories upon stories, and yet it all seemed, and still seems, in the recesses of my mind, surreal. How could I have survived the most brutal of all the rape attacks I lived through, and 6 months later, in 1972, be attending the most elegant Colorado jazz party, sitting next to Willis Conover of Voice of America? This is all beyond surreal. What are these words we are talking about? Strength and endurance? Does such horror propel one through fear to just keep going? I do know that I did not know anything else to do because there was no one to save me, to take care of me, and mostly to protect me. Once one has faced being killed and knows what one lives for, one is free. My life has been threatened so many times, I have lost counts. That's what happens in the United States and around the world when you stand up, speak up, and will not back down in spite of the horror you are living with and still facing, especially if you are a woman. Are you uncomfortable? I hope you are not because I want you to be, but because you need to be to try to step out of your own life so far away from what I am talking about so that my words will sear your soul and trigger the empathy and compassion you must reach deep inside yourself so that you can find the reservoir and strength to understand. I know there are rape victim survivors listening to or reading this right now. It was 41 years before I spoke up publicly about being raped and beaten. It happened at the Norman Rockwell Museum for Freedom's Forum on the gun control debate, and you can watch it on YouTube. Since that day, and still to this day, rape victims come up to tell me their stories. Why? Because they know I will listen. They know I will understand. They know I will believe them, and they know I care. And to my complete surprise, what comfort it gave all of us, even me. So I am still alive, still surviving, still enduring, and strong as hell. I have lived a tragic, blessed life and have never forgotten to speak up for those rape victim survivors who are so broken they cannot speak. I have never known happiness and never will. I have lived with the loss of every possible expectation one would hope for in life. A happy marriage, lasting love, a home, children, employment opportunities, and more. And yet I know I am blessed because I have been able to use every rotten thing that has happened to me to be there for others and finally for myself. And I know joy. I have been a respite foster parent to 23 children who have suffered unspeakable violence. I have been and am the creator and producer of a television program, Solutions Rising. I have enjoyed co-producing a radio program, Jazz Oasis. I am a musician for the very disabled veterans at the VA Community Living Center in Leeds. I became a historian and have had a life filled with standing up and speaking out for human and civil rights. I have pulled people out of suicide. I have been a candidate for office and been elected. I am a published author, have been written about, had a piece of music composed for me by an international musician, been interviewed, painted, and testified wherever I could. People that I would never have expected have come into my life from all walks of life, and there are beautiful loves I carry in my heart. My memories are filled with joy, and to be able to share what I have just shared with you gives me profound joy.